Sound good? All right, so this specific training is for GeoFence and points of interest. First thing we're going to be covering is the GeoFences, and then we'll cover points of interest, and then answer questions. All of you should be familiar with the interface, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I guess the key parts are that down below is how you access the GeoFences. And one of the things I did this morning is I added the points of interest tab as well. So you'll see in this screenshot there's events, GeoFence, and then there's another tab for points of interest as well. So just a little bit in terms of the differences between GeoFence and points of interest. GeoFences are really boundaries, so they're areas. For those in GIS, polygons, you might consider them polygons or boundaries. And they're specifically for areas, maybe larger areas and areas that you want to define real specifically the boundary. And you can capture information either when a vehicle or mobile asset leaves that area, or when a vehicle goes inside of that area. So that could be from, maybe a service boundary to city boundary or county boundary. For some examples of capturing information inside, it might be, for example, dump zones or wash zones or yards or crew areas, district boundaries, those sort of things where you want reports based on time inside or when they leave those areas. Points of interest are, obviously, they're points versus areas, but they do the same. They essentially have the same concept in that when a vehicle gets within a distance of that, and you can define the radius of when a vehicle arrives and stops at a location. So I think the default is about 99 yards from a point of interest. If a vehicle was within that location, it can identify when it arrives, when it departs, total time on site. And the one thing with points of interest is you could use basically like a spreadsheet with, for example, addresses and then a name. So if you notice here, these are like fire stations or park admin building or different, library, different types of that you have a spreadsheet. You can just import those in, and then you can get a report, again, based on when vehicles arrive at the specific locations, and you can capture that time. It could be, and then you can also categorize those. So in other words, you could have a category of all your fuel stations, you could have a category of city buildings, you could have a category of, the warehouses, and then again, you can report on all of those or by category. So same concepts, just a little bit different in terms of the way you bring those into the system, but you can get similar reports for both of those. For creating a GeoFence, there's a GeoFence tab, and you have a variety of options of how you create your GeoFences. You can simply create a circle. A polygon is where you can actually click on. So if it's a sort of a complex area, you can click around and it creates the area. You can do a route. So a route lets you define the width of the route. Say you want it to be 100 feet along the route, and then you just basically you can draw a line that way, or you can also use an existing track and create a route as well. So if you have a vehicle that's driven a route already, you can essentially right-click on that track and create a route from that as well. You can import GeoFences. So to import, you essentially use a KML file. So typically, you might have your boundaries already in ESRI format, say a shapefile or a geodatabase. You can go into ESRI and then export that out as a KML, and then you can import that into LiGO that way, as if you have an existing boundary. So here's
certain projection.
Is there a question?
Yeah. Did you? I'm sorry, I came in a little late. Did you specify whether any imports required a projection or not? A specific one?
So you shouldn't have an issue with that. It should be able to deal with that
so
without a problem.
State plane to the geographic or world coordinate system.
Yeah, so there's essentially ways to convert that into your so that it'll go into LiGO without a problem, project it. So if you have, I mean, to start out with, if you have a boundary, we can do that together, and we can export it to KML and then import it, and it shouldn't have a problem with doing that. So
my question isn't whether or not it can do it. It's in preparation for that. Should one have their data in a particular projection if they want to, like adding a data frame, copying, defining the projection and moving your data into it so that when you export it, it just takes on that characteristic, or?
We've imported a bunch of GeoFences, and I just went ahead and went.
I
went to WGS84.
Just
because I assume it's using Web Mercator or World Geographic.
Okay.
I would say we should define the best practice for that.
All right. Sorry. Thanks.
okay, yeah. So basically a circle geofence is fairly straightforward. You just click and then drag and it creates the circle the diameter that you want. That's a sort of an easy geofence to create. Again, the polygon is you can actually just click the boundaries and then close the boundary that way. And then here's an example of a route. So you can start and then again define I think the default is 100 feet, but you can change the width of the route depending on the size that you want around that area. And then, the idea there is it could identify if a vehicle leaves the route, how much time they're in the route, and those sort of things. This is what I mentioned about being able to use an existing track to create a route. So if you have a track that a vehicle's already driven their route, you can right-click on it, create a route geofence, and then basically name that route. Once you click Create Route Geofence, you can name it, and then it becomes a route. So that's the nice thing is if your vehicles have already been tracking, they've already got a route sort of that they've been driving, you can create it and then use that existing track to create the route. So in all cases, is there a question?
What if you have multiple vehicles in your fleet and you're creating geofences based on routes, but they have some common travel paths?
Yeah, I mean, you can do that. You can have, a separate one for each, and if they have travel paths, you can tag them based on, so you can tag for example, have a tag for the geofence that's associated with certain vehicles. So there's different ways that, depending on if you don't want certain vehicles, if they go over a route, then you just have tags to identify that this route is going to be dealing with these specific vehicles, for example, or this specific vehicle only. So you use tags to sort of limit which vehicles they may be associated with.
That makes sense.
To tag on to that question, for vehicles that kind of have, both street sweepers and solid collection vehicles have multiple paths down the same right of way, would it buffer that track multiple times, or does it have some kind of intelligence built into it that says not to have an overlap on the tracks themselves? Or is it 100 feet every time for each track line?
And you're specifically talking about creating the based on an existing track?
Yes.
So it's just going to create that, route geofence based on the track. So however, wherever the vehicle has driven, that's where it's going to create that route geofence for you. So after you've created the route geofence, you can go in and modify it too. So so there's, I guess, different ways you can deal with that or correct it, I guess, if it's not exactly how you want it.
Okay, no, that's good.
So in all cases, once you digitized or created your route, you're going to be prompted to enter in the name of the geofence. So you just put in a name specifically for that geofence, and then once you save it, it's going to come into your drop-down menu here. So as that specific geofence name. One key thing that I mentioned is tags. So this is under advanced, but this is where you define the tag. And the tag is, the key thing with the tag that you use is one that you just talked about, where you're wanting to maybe associate it with specific vehicles. The other thing is you want the tag can be used for, say, multiple geofences. So if you're, let's just take an example of parks. So you create a geofence for a park, and then you have multiple parks. So you have, here in Boise, Ann Morrison Park, and then you have another park. So you want to be able to do a report on all parks, but you also want to maybe report on specific parks. So that's where a tag comes into play, where you could do a parks tag, and then you have each geofence you create, you have the specific name for that, and you associate it to that tag. So that way you can be able to do reports, do events, and do different things with all of those. It's sort of a category or grouping, essentially, all those geofences into one tag. The other side of the tag is that it can also be used for, say, defining whether you want inside or outside. So you may have a tag that you want to know just when they're going inside of the geofence, and then you may have another tag, for example, for outside as another example. So tags are really the key thing that sort of filters or defines, either groups them and or identifies, which vehicles that you want to have associated with those. So after the first step is really creating the geofence, and you created the boundary or imported the boundary. The next important part of this is actually creating the event that's related to this. So if you don't have an event, you're not going to be able to actually do anything in terms of send notifications or get a report. So the event role, it's essentially a wizard that walks you through and I'm going to go through this and actually create these for you, but the key thing here is that under the expressions, which is number 4, you're going to want to pick the GeoFence expression, and the GeoFence expression is all related to the GeoFence. And after you've created your tag, in your drop-down menu, you'll be able to pick that here. So you can pick the specific tag that you selected, and then you can decide whether it's going to be inside or outside. So as I mentioned, parks as an example, you pick your parks tag, and then you want to know this event rule is specifically going to be, for example, all the times the vehicles go inside of all the parks, for example. The other part of the event rule is how you want to notify, and if you want to notify based on rules. So there's a lot of different types of notifications that are available. There's email. You can have an icon on the map. You can. There's an argument here. So what argument means, for example, is that you can add the field actually on down in the Events tab. You can have a new field available that actually shows in the Events tab when it gets triggered. The other one is there's actually a report argument, so you can add it as a new field into a report as well. So again, we can go through this in a little bit more detail, but there's a variety of notifications. The key notification is maybe email notification where, and that's if maybe they leave, I don't know, the state boundary and you want to automatically send an email if they leave or something along those lines. And then there's the presentation, how you want it displayed. So you don't have to show it on the map, but you can. So under presentation, if you enable this as a display, you can then, for example, if they leave their route GeoFence, it will then have an icon on the map showing where they left. Again, you don't necessarily have to have it display. You can still get a report and go to the map from the report. But this is just, again, down in the Events tab, if you wanted to actually go back, look at the event, and then display it on the map, that's how you do this, is you enable this here. And you can have, for example, a label on the GeoFence alarm as well. So what type, in this case, vehicle 1 went outside of route 1, for example, and it can actually display. So there's a lot of things you can do there with regards to presenting the GeoFence alert. Some of the types of reports that are related to the GeoFence, so GeoFence violation, again, if a vehicle leaves outside, there's a GeoFence violation, or time in area is another type of report. So here's an example of a left area. And so from the report, you have these links where you can click the link, and then what it'll do is it'll show you the line where they left the GeoFence boundary, and if they stopped anywhere, it gives them the time that they stopped outside the boundary there. And then, of course, inside, what it does is it gives you the start and end and total duration inside, and this is what I mentioned about parks. So you have Ann Morrison, and then these different parks, and it gives you each start and end time, and then totals that up, total time spent inside the area, for example. And that could be, again, a district boundary, so you want to get a report based on vehicles in a district or in a neighborhood or again, in a route, and that sort of thing. A way to do sort of an ad hoc report for your GeoFence. So if you don't have, the first thing to do is use the event rule report and sort of run the report and see. So this is a way to create an ad hoc, and then once the report meets your needs, then you can save that as a permanent report. So, and again, that gives you the flexibility of choosing your period of time, whether it be a daily, weekly, monthly, and then you pick your event rule. So your event rule is what we just created before. So, you know, we created the event rule, and then you tag. So the tag is, again, associated with which vehicles that you want this report to be run on. So you can pick your vehicles and then just generate it and see, again, if it matches what you're needing, then you can then save that as a permanent report and, you know, create a title for it and everything along those lines. All right, so let's go over here. Okay, so just ahead, one of the things I'm going to do for you guys, I'm going to create a development site where you can log in and load GeoFences, and you're not doing it within your production. So I'm going to follow up with email on that, so you can be able to log in and basically create GeoFence boundaries within sort of a test site yourself, as well as points of interest. But if you create a GeoFence, you can always remove it as well, along with points of interest. But one of my things I'm going to do is create a development application that you can log into, and sort of a sandbox where you can play around. So you should see in the interface here, you'll see a GeoFence tab and a points of interest tab. So this points of interest was actually hidden. It was hidden behind this over here on the side, and I brought it down as a new tab for you to use. And again, we're going to cover points of interest more in a minute here. So let's just go in, and there's already some existing GeoFences. I think, Steve, you said you had some existing GeoFences that you've imported. Maybe we could look at one of those or some of those.
Yeah, anything that's solid waste related. So our solid waste yard, that's a good one to use.
How do you get that?
Can I ask a quick question while you're maneuvering to that point?
Yeah.
Is there an easy way to get this information, if they create something in development and they like it, to get it in production, or is it just recreate everything again in production?
Mm-hmm. I don't have.
Yeah, you'd have to recreate it again. So I mean, if you're just gonna create one, you don't need to really do that you don't really need to do that in development. I would say more the development is if you're going to be importing. Like if you're going to take the KML files or a bunch of KML files and import those, that's the way I would use the development environment. If you're going to actually create one, like for example, if we go down and we actually create a new one, I don't think you need to do that in development, because you're just basically creating it, and then it's going to be how you like it specifically, and it's going to work. But the importing sometimes is especially if it's a lot of files, you may not want to you may want to look at the results, see if they're okay before and you can always import again and again into the production environment. Once you just may need to do some tweaking on it on the import side, because just the way it comes in, you can always go back to ESRI and then do some things. We've just experienced, for example, importing a bunch of routes. Sometimes you just decide you want to do some adjustments on ESRI and then export it out as a KML again and then import it again. So, but I would say if you're just going to be creating them, you really don't need to do that on the development side, because it's just, you can always just hit cancel. So you can create it. You can decide whether you want to save it or not, and if it's good, you can save it. If you don't, you can hit cancel.
Okay.
So yeah, this is one that's the solid waste Steve's group has put in here, and if you notice, it's got these little boxes around the boundaries, so that allows you to actually adjust the boundaries, and you can zoom in fairly close and move it to exactly how you're liking, and then once you get it to how you like it, then you can save it. So I'm going to start over here and go. I'll just go over to.
Well, you didn't delete that, did you?
No, I didn't delete it. No, I did not delete it. I just went up and went select, so I just cleared the GeoFence. So it's still there. It's right here.
Very good. We're ready to go.
I just go up to select, and that just sort of cleared what I had active.
You give me one I don't care about. That one I care deeply about.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm just going to go over here and just show you as an example here. So the common GeoFence to really use is the polygon, because you can get it fairly accurate versus the circle. The circle is just, you're really just going like this, and you can, it's a way to do a quick GeoFence, and then you just save it. If you do have some specific, you can set your radius. So that is one way to do that. But a lot of people typically use just the polygon option, because you can click around here and get specifically. So if I'm wanting to get right around this boundary here, and then you just come back up to the circle and double click. Oh, let's see. So there we go. Sometimes you get that message, but it's okay. So then you can come in, you can just zoom into the area, and you can grab these are called vertices. You can grab those and just sort of move it around to exactly how you like it before you save it. So you drag these down and get it to where you like it, and then once you have it to where you like it, you can then call this so I just call that test geo, and then I can create a tag. So under the advanced section here, if it's a new tag, use two. You can use an existing tag, so these are some of the existing ones, and you can check the box. But if I create a new one, call this, let's see, just call this test geo waste, something along those lines, just so I remember. And then I add that. So now I have, this is a GeoFence in the list. If I come here, let's see, I gotta actually save it. So once you save it, it sort of disappears, but now it'll be in the list. So as test geo here. So that's really the first step in creating. You just create your GeoFence. The next step is you create your event rule. So you go up to event rule, you go to new event rule, and let's say we want time inside test geo waste, and then you can have more of a description. One thing you can do is you can say if you're initially creating the GeoFence and these sort of events, you can just say no, and what that means is it won't be enabled until you decide. So if you create a new, so it's sometimes a good idea to just go ahead and create you could create the event rule, but just don't enable it until you're ready to enable it. So that just doesn't do anything until you decide. You can come back, open it up again, and then enable it. Then you can decide, which vehicles they are associated with. You can pick those specific vehicles. You can decide to always have it active or make it on a schedule. So again, you can do just within work hours or off hours. We'll just leave it as always active here. This is that expression that I was talking about. So again, you're going to pick the GeoFence expression. And then, again, we created earlier that tag, which is the test geo waste. And we want to know when vehicles go inside that test GeoFence area there. And then the next step is to create a notification or not. So, you know, here's some different types of notifications. The usual one may be email. And again, you only want to, you don't have to have a notification to get a report, or so you can still get reports without notifications. But if you need notifications like emails or other types of things, this is where you set this up. Or if you need it to show, so we're just going to skip that one for now. Again, you can decide whether to display this on the map. So when I say display on the map, that means if the vehicle, so if it's a, in this case, I'm going, you know, I'm wanting to track when vehicles go inside of this boundary. So that, what that means is I really don't want to see all these alarms happening on the map all the time that a vehicle goes inside in this case, because I just want to basically a report telling me I want to capture the amount of time they go inside the area. It's not really important for me to be notified or any of that if they go inside, because I just want to know the time they spend, more of the reporting. So it kind of depends on the type of you know, rules that you want. A lot of times it's more notifications if they're leaving, or it might be if it's, you know, it might be if it's a specific area that of concern, like they're always going to, I don't know, McDonald's all the time for 3 hours a day or something. That might be a case where you'd be wanting to be notified. But if you're just wanting to know, get a report based on time inside, I don't necessarily need to display that on the map. So then I've saved that event rule. And again, so that's down here, time inside test geo waste area. So first step is have your GeoFence. Next step is create your event rule. And then the last step is to, is your report. So under report, you go manage reports. Under manage reports, you pick, typically it's just this event rule template. So I'm going to pick event rule template, open that up, and then what this again allows me to do is I can set my time frame that I'm interested in, say it could be weekly. I want a weekly report, and I'm going to choose this, again, this event rule is time inside the test geo waste area. So one thing with the with this event rule is you can also combine multiple events. So it might be, let's just take, I want to know idling inside that area. So I could pick idling, and I could pick time inside. And what that would do is it would combine my, it would allow me to create a report based on idling and time inside that GeoFence boundary, for example. So that's the nice thing about these event rule reports is you can combine events to create a report that sort of shows, or it could be, let's just take solid waste, you know, number of stops within their route, or stops that they missed in their route, or so this is how you can set up, again, multiple sort of event rules to identify things within the boundary or leaving the boundary. And then again, you choose your vehicles that you're wanting to pick that are associated with this. This is the tag. So going back to the question about where you have specific vehicles that are maybe on specific routes, that's where we may want to create some additional tags that sort of narrow that down a little bit. Instead of all solid waste, it might be some specific vehicles within solid waste that are associated with that route, for example. then again, you can add your title of your report. So, in this case, time inside, geo-waste area, something along those lines, and then you can, for energy vehicles or something along those lines could be the subtitle. So you have your main title, your subtitle. You can choose your format that you want, and then you basically could save that, and then that's a report that you could run based on that GeoFence boundary and your event rule. So I'm not going to save that at this point, but so I'm going to go back in. Is there questions about just the general workflow of creating a GeoFence, creating the event rule, and then creating a report for that?
Stephen has a question.
Okay.
Kind of going on that multiple event rule, is there a way in the LiGO system to trigger the GeoFence, an inside GeoFence alert based on another event rule?
Based on another event?
Idling in this GeoFence for so long, but for us, I'm trying to think of a way of reducing the false positives, and we want to know, like, if a truck doesn't lift, then start the GeoFence. That's when you trigger it.
So if I didn't hear the part about lifting. You said lift?
Yeah, so
something?
the lift arm goes out, which is one of the event rules we have. If that triggers, so it goes from 0 to 1, and they're in the GeoFence, then start the time on the inside GeoFence alert.
I believe we can do that. Yes. So, what's the report that you want to? What's sort of the end result or output that you're wanting to identify there?
Because the problem is that we're going to be traveling. We're going to be overlapping GeoFences as we travel, which is it's going to be alerting. And I know we can set a time limit to say anything under 15 minutes don't trigger. But if we really want to focus in on that to get, true positives back on that it's actually in the GeoFence it's supposed to be in, that maybe we use another trigger to begin that process.
Okay. Yeah, I believe we can do that. I just need to I might need to brainstorm internally here to I don't know if we have to do a scripting or if we have to do something special for that, but I'm pretty sure we can do that. It's just, I think I need to get with some others here and brainstorm on the best approach for that.
Okay. Otherwise, as post-processing we can do, I'm just trying to figure out what the best course of action would be.
Okay, and so, and it's lifting the arm, and do you want to know for each time they lift the arm within the GeoFence? Is that what?
I just want to say that they have arrived to their route, and now they're on their route, and I don't care. That then it would be your normal. As soon as it crosses out of that boundary, we stop the. You can stop the GeoFence. It's just the initiation trigger really is what I'm curious.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we can do that. I will probably need to test that out and just verify that it. So let me just look here. I think what we can do is that would actually occur in the event rule itself. So let's go back to our test event rule here, and I think what we would do is we would set the expression up here. So you can do advanced. Let's see. So when the trigger, so it goes inside. So I think we can do a combination here, either adding a rule, and it would be basically, I think, an analog rule where we would go.
ongoing rule.
Yeah, so there's essentially, we would have it might be actually an event code. So there's going to be an event code specifically for the arm going up, and so again, I'm going to have to sort of work internally, but I know we can basically combine event rules and to where if it's inside, and then it also basically the event code for the arm going up, whatever that number is, I don't know it off the top of my head, but like let's say it's 33 is the event code for the arm going up. So we could combine those, and then we could also close the event rule basically by when it leaves. So so for example, it would be test GeoFence, and then so it would go in, so the vehicle goes inside that route, and it also in the event code 33, meaning let's say the arm goes up, so that combination starts the event, and then it basically finishes the event when it leaves the leaves that boundary. I'm pretty sure that's the way we would do it, but we just need to test that out.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
That's cool. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Let's see. All right, so let's go back to our point here. And, okay. So points of interest, again, very similar. So the way I access this is it's essentially was over on the left-hand side, hidden, and I drag and drop the points of interest down on there. So we can always move it back just by opening this up, dragging it back. So that's the nice thing about this interface is you can move things around based on what you need to see or don't see. And you can actually turn it off. It's under the Windows drop-down menu. There's a points of interest option. Similar to GeoFences, you can create them manually. So you can just right-click, create your GeoFence, or your point of interest. You can decide labeling if you want it to display or not. So it doesn't have to be something that's displayed to capture information behind the scenes. But if you want it to actually display, you can show, the label and visually show that. So when you right-click on the map at the location, you can say Add POI. Once this form comes up, you can enter the title, a description, and you can also adjust the latitude and longitude if you know the latitude and longitude, or you can just leave it as is. So wherever you click, it's going to automatically put in the coordinates. But if you know the exact coordinates, you could adjust this and it'll move that point to that location. And then you can decide if you want a category or put it in a category or not. So if there's no categories defined, then it'll allow you to create a new category for that and put the points of interest in. So a little bit more advanced functionality, you can manage the categories. So once you've created the category, let's say city facility, you can set the scale dependencies of those. So, how far in they turn on or off based on the min and max zoom, and you can also set different colors for the different categories as well. You can add custom fields, and you can do a lot of other things with these points of interest as well. So some example reports that are used, time on-site report or sites not visited. So sites not visited could be, it's just a reverse basically. If you have specific locations, an example might be if you're, let's say a permit, your building permit, and you're supposed to go out and visit X number of sites in the day, you could then, what this report would show you is where, basically where the vehicles had not gone to those locations, and of course, the time on site is the reverse of that. And then again, you can use the ad hoc event rule report as well with this too. So here's an example of time on site. So again, it gives you the arrival, date, time, departure, duration. You can have, again, if you define categories and sites, you can have specific information in the report based on the, not only the specific point of interest, but also the category. And then here's an example of sites not visited. So maybe, again, here's just some examples: warehouse and service station.
Brad, does the points of interest, does it use some kind of buffer around the point to determine whether or not you visited it or not, or do you have to like get the X5 to match up exactly? How does it know?
Yeah, so let me show you.
Thank you.
So under event rules, there's a stops. Basically, stops at known locations are related to points of interest. And so if you notice here, vehicles stopped within 200 yards. So the event rule, basically the event code for this is 2. And so here's an example where you have the category is selected inside, and then you can change this radius if you'd like. But this is how it's set up now, is that it's 197 yards. If the vehicle gets within 197 yards, then it captures that. Or you can, again, you can adjust this radius threshold within the event rule. So you could use this as an example to then create additional event rules, because this is the base setup for those points of interest and how it's going in and out. But you can, again, you can use tags. You can create new event rules for specific things that you're wanting to do.
And it just has to cross the path of that radius buffer. It doesn't actually have to like stop and go to a 0 mile per hour. Like, what does a stop mean in LiGO?
So it means the vehicle, if the vehicle goes to that location and actually stops. So it does mean, you know, stops at that known location. So it actually does, the vehicle does have to stop moving, and to identify that it's, because if it just drives by, it won't capture it if it keeps driving, but if it actually stops, then it'll capture that. So let's go over to points of interest here. So right now there's no points of interest, but we can add, you can either click add this add POI. The other thing we can do is just right click here and go add POI this way. So you notice it puts the point there as soon as I clicked, it created that. But again, I could adjust this, or I could, you know, so there's ways to adjust it. But wherever you click, if you decide that's not the right location, you could always hit cancel. And then I could come in, maybe zoom in a little bit closer, go add POI that way, for example, test POI. So one thing on POI is a lot of times the description may be the address, or it may be a lot of times the name might be the actual what it is, meaning it's let's say it's the city public works department, or it's the, you know, Chevron station, or, and then you may put the address there. So you can use this address tool to, of course, get the address as well. So you can drop this over, and so let's just do that beforehand here. So I can go here, get the address. So let's say it's this 11, and then I can right click here, add POI. So I'll just test POI. So you could do that, and then you can decide if you want it in a particular category, existing category, or you can create a new one. Since there's a test one already, I'll put this in that category there. So now you have down here in this category, you can always right click, and you can do a variety of things from this. So one thing to note, with points of interest, you can actually use points of interest for routing as well. So if, for example, you want someone to route from one point of interest to another, you can start, when you right click on it, you can start a route from that, or you can create a job from that. So there's a couple different things that you can do with points of interest that you really can't do with GeoFences. So you can't really create a job on a GeoFence, but you can create jobs and routes based on points of interest. You can also obviously edit that, or you could delete it. So I could come back in, and if I decide I want to change something, I can change what's been done there. If I want to manage the categories, so I can also, I was add, I can do that. I think, yeah, so I just right-clicked, showed manage categories. So these are the different categories for these. So if I wanted to change this to say purple, I could pick a different color for this. I could also again set the zoom scales for how these are when they turn on or off. There's some different things for geocoding based on those, and then you can also add, if you decide you want to add custom fields on those as well, this is where you can manage those custom fields. So if we go back here, there's a lot of different things that you can do. So for example, import, I can, let's see, so import. So if I pick import, this is where you could just go out and pick an existing spreadsheet. So the spreadsheet just needs to have an address, and then it needs to have the, if you have a specific name for those, and this chart shows you the format down here of how you might have this. So as an example, a lot of times again, you could use KML, or you could use a spreadsheet to import those. The description is the description name, and then the name here. And then again, you can choose to put it in a category that you want to import that into. So you just browse to the file, pick your category, and then essentially save that, and then it'll import that that file into your category. So so again, this can be you could create a new event rule, but you can utilize this stops at known locations as sort of a starting point if you want to create a new one, because this has the information about how it captures. And again, if you want you have your specific radius of how close you get to that location. You can define that for yourself. And then, example reports would be time on site is an example report that utilizes the GeoFence, or I'm sorry, the points of interest. So I don't know that there's any examples here, but let's see. So do you have a need for points of interest, or is your interest more on the GeoFence side?
The points of interest from solid waste is something we'd like to explore, but we need to talk about its application.
Yeah, an example of points of interest for solid waste could be all of the, within a route. Yes, there isn't any. There's no points of interest currently, so obviously it shows. But this is basically what this. Once you get a point of interest set up, this is essentially what the report will look like.
What we were talking about, Red, was either our customers or our bin locations that we service, and using that as a way to know if we missed a bid or didn't, or service the bin more than once, I guess. And then I was also thinking we also do bulk pickup, kind of, which is a more of an open, on-demand system. So there's definitely some application for us.
Yeah, so that's definitely an example. If you had your customers loaded in, and then it would actually identify if a vehicle missed, if they didn't put the arm down at that point of interest, you could basically identify those based on what was missed, or you could do the reverse. Here are all the customers that were, where the arm went down at this specific location. You could obviously just, without the points of interest, what you're going to be getting without the points of interest is, if we go back into event roles, there's two event roles. One is known locations and one is unknown locations. So you can obviously at stops where they're stopping, you could get the address, but that they may be stopping at places that are not, necessarily where a customer is. So where there is a known location, that's where points of interest is a good use of that, where these are known places where they're supposed to stop. That way you could keep track of that, and then again combine the stop and where the arm goes down to either again capture that they did the work there or they didn't at known locations. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this just because. Get rid of that. So any questions about points of interest then? Any other use cases that you might be interested in with regards to using points of interest?
You mentioned about using points of interest for routing. How would you use it for that?
So, so what you could do is, again, with routing, you can either, I can create a route from any sort of location. I can start a new route from a location, but if you already have, say, points in the system, you can right-click on those points, and then, so let's just, I think I'm gonna have to I'm gonna create another, I'll create another, point of interest to just show you how that works. So let's say, create a new point of interest, customer number 1. And then, let's see, create, add DOI over here, customer number 2. And then create another one up here, number 3. So if for example, I could start new route, so what it's going to do is it's just going to auto-populate basically, and so location is based on the point of interest. So if you're just to right-click on the map, it's going to put the address, or you can create the route based on this, and then you can just click on, I can click on my next one and add it to the current route, and see, get this out of the way. So now, basically, this is what this is doing is this is creating a route based on the point of interest. Then what you could do is name this route. So you can, again, if you have points of interest, you're just going from one point to the next, and then it's going to route the vehicle based on this, or you have an existing route. So let's just go test route, and then if I could save this as a route, so I'll go ahead and save this. So I now have a route, so that's really under the dispatch section. If I drag this over here, we could probably do a whole nother training session just on dispatch. But now, with this, I can come back in, edit this route. I could create a schedule for this. I could assign it to a worker. So these are, different vehicles that I can assign the route to. I can create a schedule for this if it's always the same, or like every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they're going to do this route. So again, you don't necessarily have to use points of interest for the route. You can, again, just use addresses, and you can import routes as well. So you can, under here, there's ability to import a route, an existing route. But again, if you have points of interest, that's something that you can just create the route based on those points of interest of where they're supposed to go. If you import, you can also, you can optimize the route. So you don't necessarily have to go in that order. You can run this optimize function, which will then, put it in the best flow direction to save, gas or whatever, is another thing that you can do there. But again, I think we could probably do a whole nother session just on the routing and the dispatch functionality, but I just wanted to show you that's sort of the concept of using points of interest to create a route.
Routing through this, or are you routing somewhere else?
Paper.
Okay, so when routing comes available for this, there's nothing to import. You're just going to have to create all the routes.
We'll figure it out, but this is an interesting we got a couple different ways we might go, but it's good to see if we have availability.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a tricky situation.
Okay, let's cleaning that up here. Yeah, and then, you know, yeah, in your dispatch, you can see for each, you could go back each day, you can see what routes are assigned to which vehicles, and again, you can, you'll be able to see sort of, once you create your route list, you can see what routes are complete, whether they're late on their routes, you know, if the, sort of the state of the route, how much, again, are they currently working on it, or is it not started? So there's a lot of things you can do with the sort of the route dispatch option there. Okay. Okay, so questions. I've got a few more slides after this, and we can, if you're interested in creating some real geofences or real points of interest, we can do that. If the city has some real examples that you want to create, if anybody wants to have some added, we can do that.
Anyone want to add a real life example?
There you go. Or I'm seeing a lot of head nods, no.
I don't have a real life.
Head nodding up and down, or head nodding right to left?
Nodding no, nodding no. So I think most of this stuff will be, like, I think that the users seem comfortable with it, but probably would like to just be able to ask questions if they need it.
Yeah, and exactly, and we're totally available, totally available to help you through that. So if someone has, you know, I know this is sort of a training session, and everybody has their own needs, but if anybody wants to create one, we just basically will send you a WebEx, get online, and assist you through the process of doing this. So don't feel that you're, you know, we're giving you this training and then you're on your own. That's not the case at all. We're here to help you. So just shoot us an email, say I need help with, you know, adding a geofence or importing geofences or creating points of interest, and we'll basically, you know, if you have real world examples of what you want to do, we'll help you through actually doing it, especially the first time, because we know it's, you know, it's one thing to do a training workshop, but when you actually have a real example, there may be other things involved. So
I think Stephen's going to be the one that's, you know, doing a lot more of it.
We're gonna break the system, Rat.
okay, bring it on.
They're the only ones that are trying to track, you know, where their trucks are going and whether they're lifting and fencing, and, you know, where environmental probably isn't going to be doing as much of the, you know, where did they go as much as did they go outside of the boundary.
Yeah. We want to get a little bit more pinpoint on the
Right.
data we're collecting. It's good. We're getting good aggregate, but I want to get a little bit more surgical.
What about transportation, Diane? Did your
Nothing that I know of. I haven't heard anything about doing anything about it or anything.
Is Sonia watching this from someplace else? Sonia familiar with this?
I don't know if she's watching. I was hoping she was going to show up. She was on the invite.
Okay. We may want to make sure she gets this video, and then.
Yeah.
But what I think I'm seeing and hearing is those of you that have GIS knowledge and experience, not me, will probably do better with all of this stuff. So creating it, maintaining
Well, it's
it.
digitized on it.
Yeah.
Anybody can draw
Yeah.
something on
Yeah.
their map. It's wire it up if there's an interest to do that.
Right.
It's a multi-step process, that's
Yeah.
for sure, if you want to get some value out of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any additional questions while we have Rhett here?
I have one. There was a discussion recently about, that I kind of heard of related to an alternate base map. And I don't know that I ever.
We haven't gotten to that point yet to have them make a decision. I'm gonna invite you guys to our.
But can I just ask a question?
You can try.
Are there, Brett, are any of your customers using different base maps other than the Google base map? And if so, what types of sources are being used?
So yes, to answer your question, others are using other base maps. And we have a variety of different types of base maps that can be used. So you could use OpenStreetMap, you could use Bing Maps, you could use ESRI Map Service maps. So, and those would basically be in the drop-down menu here that you would choose between Google Maps or another map source that you're interested in, and then it just switches the map, the underlying map.
And one other clarification, please, with respect to the Esri maps that you speak of. Are you talking about the Esri topographic vector-based maps, or their, base maps, or are we talking about customer-hosted map services, or both?
Both.
Cool.
So
Okay.
most customers obviously want their own maps, so that, their hosted map service that they have on their ArcGIS server that's published out, that's it's basically a URL. Most customers are wanting their own maps as the underlying map service, for example.
Well, we are contributing to the community base map, and they're updating that data quite rapidly. So we do monthly updates with them and could make it even more frequent if we chose. So it should reflect all of our current street tracks. We do streets and parcels and buildings and, light rail stations, a few different layers, but it certainly makes for a pretty up-to-date product.
Okay.
Are there any restrictions on the map service projection or extent?
Yeah, there may be some. Depending on the projections that you have. There may be some restrictions to, depending on the projection.
Yeah.
We'll have to look at that.
All your data is being recorded in geographic coordinates, and that's what path the vehicles are being traced at. So if our internal maps were done in our state plane coordinate system, they just wouldn't overlay. We'd have to go through the process of redoing things and providing a WGS 84 or something that would be compatible with a direct overlay with the GPS, wouldn't we?
Yeah, so I guess I think what we probably have to do is have a separate meeting on that to just work through, because there are specific format, we've run into, I guess, some projections that either had to be reprojected or we had to work with the customer a little bit to get it to line up, but
the Esri online stuff works smoothly without any issue, right?
Right. Yeah, like the Esri stuff that's already out there. Yeah, that's no problem.